Treasury Secretary of the US, Alexander Hamilton, pushed through the assumption of the state debt following the Revolutionary War and created what we could call Eurobonds in the United States of America, which, by the way, became the foundation of the federal economic government for the United States of America. And the success of this in the past 212 years should not be underestimated also on this side of the Atlantic.
Thank you, Olli. I want you to jump in, Minister Guindos and Barón as well.
I think that Eurobonds perhaps are the final target, but I think that, as Wolfgang has mentioned, that we have to take a lot of steps before and that we are doing that. But I would like to stress, and I think that this is important, the importance of the political commitment of the different member states. I remember in 2003, when France and Germany breached the rules of the Stability and Growth Pact, and I think that because of that decision, we lost a lot of legitimacy to impose, fiscal austerity to Greece. So this is something that we cannot repeat again. And I think that it's not only a question of, the governance, the fiscal compact, etc. We need much more compromise and commitment from the different governments with the importance of fiscal discipline and with the importance of a common competitive approach to economic policy among the different members of the Eurozone.
But what about in discussing the participation of the ECB? Should the ECB take a haircut the way the private sector would?
Well, I don't think so. We are discussing about the private sector involvement. I think that, that kind of haircut might impair the monetary mechanism of monetary policy that now is implemented by the ECB. So I think that the ECB should not be involved in any kind of public sector involvement instead of private sector involvement, as the private sector, is having the discussion with the Greek government right now. And I hope, as Olli has mentioned, that we will reach an agreement quite soon.
Minister Barón.
On a la même position les uns et les autres désormais sur les eurobonds. À l'extérieur de la zone euro, les eurobonds sont présentés comme la pierre philosophale, l'alpha et l'oméga de la réponse à la crise internationale dont l'épicentre est actuellement au sein de la zone euro. Les eurobonds, c'est quoi? C'est mutualiser les dettes. Mais mutualiser les dettes dans des pays dont la principale question est un niveau de surendettement public et dont l'autre principale question, c'est nourrir la croissance. Et comme nous devons avancer en même temps sur ces deux chemins, si nous mutualisons, nous ne réglons pas les problèmes de fond, qui sont la construction d'une zone monétaire qui n'a pas été fondée de façon optimale. Et ce que nous faisons, ce que les chefs d'État ont décidé en décembre, c'est d'abord de remettre la maison à l'endroit. Et la maison à l'endroit, c'est de la discipline, c'est de la coordination, c'est de la convergence, et c'est naturellement un chemin de solidarité. Le chemin de solidarité que nous empruntons ne prend pas la forme des eurobonds, il prend la forme des pare-feux. À la fin de tout cela, lorsque les États auront respecté leurs engagements et le calendrier de désendettement, lorsque la situation sera stabilisée, qu'à l'intérieur de l'esprit des marchés, ce doute de confiance n'existera plus, alors probablement que les eurobonds pourront apparaître. Mais ça ne peut pas être un préalable à la résolution de la crise, ça peut être une conclusion à la stabilité de notre zone monétaire.
We would like to get the audience involved and open the session to Q&A. We have microphones walking around, and in the meantime, while we get a microphone to you, I want to play a soundbite from George Soros. And Minister Schäuble, let me read this to you. George Soros says that on the policies out of Germany, the policies Germany is pushing on the Eurozone is creating a deflationary debt spiral, putting pressure on wages and profits and reduces tax returns, and the debt is expressed in nominal terms. A ratio of GDP to debt, GDP declines and the debt ratio goes against you. This is the trap that we are caught in today. Overcome the short term, and this is the short term, this could lead to a lost decade. How worried are you about a lost decade?
I don't agree with George Soros. not surprisingly. And I would like to tell him and to tell you, to tell the audience, if you want to create more growth, you can't deliver this only by spending more public money and increasing the deficits. Even in the Anglo-Saxonian economy, we got the report from Roger von Reinhardt that if you have achieved some grade of public deficit, increasing deficit is counterproductive in creating growth. Therefore, you need structural reforms. And therefore, we concentrate in Europe not on increasing the deficit, which are even too high, but in structural reforms. And I have been finance minister since a little bit more than 2 years. At the very beginning, I was asked, how will you deliver your obligations to the European Pact on Stability and Growth on behalf of the German deficit? I said, my reaction was, we will. The government has decided to do it. Some months later, I was criticized, oh, you are reducing your deficit too quick, and you destroy growth. Some months later, we delivered in Germany growth by 3.7 points in 2010, 3.0 in 2011. And Tim Geithner, our good friend, came over to Berlin and said, oh, we will make American fiscal policy more German-like. Because in Germany, I don't know how it works in the United States. In Germany, and I think in Europe, it's clear, if you want to have more internal demand for investment and for consumption, you have to deliver some confidence. If you reduce your deficit, if you make your deficit sustainable, in Germany it works. People regain confidence and then they spend. The actual figures of private consumption in Germany are very high, very sufficient, and therefore the German economic outlook is driven by the internal demand, and we can destroy it in increasing the deficit, and we can support it, and therefore we have to go for structural reforms, and that is a better way, and I think it will be.
We have two quick comments here from Minister Guindos and then Olli Rehn, and we have a question then following.
No, just a short remark. I come from the country that put in place the largest fiscal stimulus in the Eurozone, from a surplus of 2% in 2007 to a deficit of 11% 2 years later. And in Spain, simultaneously to this fiscal stimulus, we had the largest deterioration of the labor market that we have ever seen. So I think that we should be careful in considering, the implications that, a fiscal expansion has on the economy. Because now in Spain we are having difficulties from the financial standpoint because, this fiscal stimulus was mistaken. So I think that it's much more important, in order to create confidence, as Wolf has mentioned, to put your fiscal accounts on a sustainable path and simultaneously implementing an aggressive and ample agenda of structural reforms.
Olli Rehn.
I would like to bring briefly a global and long-term view on this discussion. In fact, inspired by Jean-Claude Trichet's wise words in one of yesterday's discussions. If you look at the previous decades and the crises in previous decades, we have the cases of Latin America in the 1980s, since 1982. Then we have the Asian crisis in the 1990s, and we have, in fact, the cases of several European countries in the 1990s. What has been the lesson in all these cases? They have taken structural reforms and reinforced the sustainability of their public finances as the foundation of solid and sustainable economic growth. And as a result, Latin America overall, look at Brazil, rather resilient even in the current global difficulties, financial crisis. Asia, the same story, much more resilient in the current financial crisis. And in Europe, if you look at the countries who went through a similar kind of experience, they are now more resilient. In the 1980s, the Netherlands and Denmark, 30 years ago, sorry to say to my Danish friends, but Denmark was almost the basket case of Europe. Now it is a very resilient and one of the model economies in Europe. In the 1990s, Finland and Sweden, very serious banking crisis, serious promise of external balances, now doing relatively well, and Germany in the past decade. I think this is an encouraging example of the importance and success of structural reforms in Europe and globally.
We have to get 2 questions in here on the second row, and then I have Minister Barone with a comment. First here in the second row, and then I'm coming in the back.
Thank you. It's Luigi Buttiglione from Brevan Howard Asset Management. I want to take advantage of the joint presence of the Spanish Economic Minister and of Commissioner Rehn to ask them a question, also leveraging on what they just commented today. I see the Spanish minister said that he basically wants to do all he can to keep his house in order. And I also hear from Commissioner Rehn that he sent 5 letters in the past to countries which were deviating. Now, unfortunately, we speak about reassurance, confidence in the market, but we as market participants would like to know, for instance, from the Spanish economic minister, what they are going to do to put their house in order this year. As we know, on the last day of last year, there was a substantial overshooting of their deficit. And now we are hearing some comments which we don't find very assuring concerning the meeting of their targets of 4.4% of GDP this year. I wanted to know, please, if you can reassure us that this target will be strictly met, and what is your opinion also, Commissioner Rehn, if this target should be met or it should not, or because the economic condition deteriorated, they should not. Thank you.
Minister, briefly, please.
Well, it's totally right that the new government of Spain arrived in office on December the 23rd, and on December the 26th learned that we had a slippage in the public accounts of 2 full percentage points of GDP, and 3 days after took action to reduce and to rein in the public deficit by 1.5% of GDP, even increasing the tax on personal revenues. Simultaneously, today the Spanish cabinet is taking an action to control and to impose much more transparency on the regions. That is generally regarded as one of the main sources of the deviation that you have mentioned before. So we will have much more commitment, much more compromise from the regions in terms of public consolidation, of public account consolidation, and simultaneously, what I have to say is that the rule that we are going to have for the Spanish regions and for the Spanish central government is going to be even stricter than the rules set in Brussels for the rest of the members of the Eurozone. And finally, with respect to your comments on the future of the path of fiscal consolidation, what I have to say is that the strategy of the Spanish government is going to be based on a 2-pillar approach. Fiscal consolidation is not an option. This is something that I have mentioned a lot of times. But simultaneously, we have to pay a lot of attention, and I think that this is going to be vital to the banking industry restructuring and to the labor market reform. Spain is a country with an unemployment rate of 23% of the labor force. This is something that we cannot accept at all. And I think that this is going to be the vital element of stress and of importance and the main priority that in the agenda of the new government. And I expect that over the next weeks the new government will put forward a reform of the banking industry and simultaneously an ample, profound and important reform of the labor market.
How much capital does the banking industry need?
Well, this is not a question of capital. What we have seen is that there is the need of further provisioning by the Spanish banks because there is a gap between the book value and the market value of the assets, especially the real estate assets.
Olli Rehn?
I think it's of course regrettable that the fiscal targets over last year were missed. and therefore it was very important that the new government